The human warrior, whose name was Arik, was born into a small village surrounded by hills and forests. From the moment he opened his eyes, life seemed determined to test him. When he was very young, he had an accident that left deep, jagged scars across his arms, shoulders, and face. They were marks that could not be hidden no matter how much he tried. Even when he wore long sleeves and tried to keep to himself, the scars told everyone who looked at him a story of pain and survival. But in a village full of ordinary people, survival was not always admired. Children in the village stared at him when he walked past. Some whispered to each other, pointing at his scars. "Look at him. What happened to him?" they would ask, in voices that were meant to be loud enough for him to hear. Older kids were sometimes crueler, giving him nicknames that stung. Patchwork, one of them called him once, and the laughter that followed cut deeper than any wound he had ever known. The whispers didn't stop when he grew older. Even adults sometimes looked at him with curiosity mixed with pity. They would murmur, "Poor boy, he's been through so much," but their words felt hollow. It was as if the scars made him less than others, like they carried a weight he had no right to lift. Arik did not enjoy being alone, but loneliness became his companion, because friendship often brought teasing. He wanted to run and play like other children, but he learned quickly that standing out made him a target. Sometimes he would sit by the river, watching the water move smoothly over the stones, imagining his reflection without scars, imagining a life where people looked at him with respect instead of mockery. The reflection in the water never changed, but day after day he kept returning to that quiet spot, dreaming. His family loved him, of course, and they did their best to protect him. His mother would clean and care for his scars, and his father would tell him stories of bravery, hoping Arik would see that strength comes from more than appearances. "One day they will see your scars as a sign of courage," his father told him one evening, lighting the fireplace. "These marks are not weaknesses. They are proof that you survived something others could not. Remember that." Arik wanted to believe his father, but it was difficult when the world outside laughed at him. School was never easy. Teachers sometimes looked past him, thinking he could not handle physical activity or discipline, though he was sharp and quick-witted. During games, he was often left out or paired with weaker students to protect him, which only made him feel more isolated. But inside, a fire began to grow. Every laugh, every whisper, every pointed finger added fuel to a quiet determination. Arik did not want to just survive, he wanted to prove that he could thrive. He wanted to rise above the mockery and show the village, and eventually the world, that scars could not define a person's worth. The first real challenge came when Arik was a teenager. The village was preparing for an annual contest, a competition of skill and courage that was open to every young person. It involved climbing, running, and handling small tasks that tested strength and intelligence. Many people laughed at the idea that Arik would participate. "Why even try?" they said. "You will just embarrass yourself." For the first time, Arik felt the weight of their doubt not as a burden, but as a challenge. It was a spark that ignited something within him. He began training secretly. At first it was simple exercises, running along the hills, climbing trees, lifting stones. But gradually he pushed himself further. His arms hurt, his muscles ached, and many nights he could barely sleep. He fell many times and scraped himself, again sometimes leaving new scars. Yet instead of feeling defeated, he saw each bruise and scrape as proof that he was learning, growing stronger. Each time he stumbled, he reminded himself of his father's words, "Survival is just the beginning. Strength is what comes after." Arik's training was not just physical. He studied strategies, watched older warriors from nearby villages, and learned how to think quickly in tense situations. His scars became part of his armor, a reminder of past failures and the lessons they taught him. The more he trained, the more he realized that his body, though marked, was capable of incredible resilience. He could climb higher, run faster, and endure pain longer than many of his peers. He was turning what others saw as weakness into strength. Meanwhile, the village continued to mock him. Children still called him names and adults whispered doubts, But Arik began to feel a change within himself. He walked taller, held his head higher, and carried a quiet confidence that grew with each passing day. He learned to ignore the mockery, to see it not as an attack, but as proof that he was moving beyond their understanding. In his heart, he knew that one day the story would change. One day the people who laughed would watch him rise. The day of the contest arrived, and the entire village gathered to watch. People whispered and shook their heads, certain that Arik would fail. But he had spent months preparing, and he felt ready. As he stepped into the field, he could feel the eyes on him, some filled with doubt, some with curiosity, and others with outright derision. He ignored them all and focused on the path ahead, remembering every run, every climb, and every moment of pain that had led him here. The contest began, and Arik moved with a surprising grace and speed. He climbed the steep walls, balanced across narrow beams, and solved the small challenges that others stumbled on. People began to whisper differently, now with surprise rather than mockery. He felt a sense of satisfaction, not in proving them wrong, but in knowing he had pushed himself beyond his limits. By the end of the contest, even the harshest critics in the crowd could not deny his skill and courage. Though he did not yet know it, this moment marked the beginning of his journey. The mockery had shaped him, but it had not defeated him. The scars he had once hidden with shame were now silent witnesses to his resilience. In the quiet after the contest, as people started to leave, Arik looked at the setting sun and felt something he had never felt before: hope. The path ahead would be long and filled with new challenges, but he was ready. The boy who had been mocked for his scars was beginning to rise, and his story was just beginning. After the contest, Arik returned home, but the experience had awakened something inside him. For the first time, he realized that mockery and doubt could not define who he was. He had felt a spark of pride, a feeling that he could achieve more than anyone in the village had imagined. Yet deep down, he knew that this was only the beginning. There were greater challenges ahead, and if he wanted to rise above the whispers and laughter, he would have to push himself harder than ever before. Arik began training every morning before the sun rose, long before the village stirred. The cold wind cut across his face, and the early mist made his body shiver, but he welcomed it. He ran across hills, jumped over streams, and climbed trees to strengthen his arms and legs. Every movement, every exercise was a reminder that his body, marked with scars, was capable of incredible strength. The pain became a teacher, and he learned patience, discipline, and endurance. His training was not only physical. Arik realized that strength alone would not make him a warrior. He needed intelligence, quick thinking, and strategy. He spent hours observing animals in the forest, learning how they moved, how they hunted, and how they survived. He studied the movements of the villagers during their daily tasks and even watched travelers passing through, noting their skills and tactics. Slowly, he began to understand that true strength came from combining mind and body, from learning to think ahead and anticipate challenges. One day, while practicing near the forest, he met an older man who was known in the village as a retired warrior. His name was Eamon, and though most people thought of him as quiet and distant, he saw something in Arik. "You are not like the others," Eamon said, his eyes scanning Arik's determined movements. "You carry scars, yes, but they are not your weakness. They are your story, your proof that you can endure what others cannot. If you are willing to learn, I can teach you how to turn your pain into power." Arik felt a mix of surprise and hope. He had never had someone recognize his potential before. Most people focused on his scars, on his failures, on what they believed he could not do. But Eamon looked at him differently. He began to meet the old warrior in secret, learning not only techniques of combat, but also lessons about patience, focus, and the importance of heart. A true warrior, Eamon explained, does not fight to prove to others. A true warrior fights to become the best version of himself. The rest will follow naturally. Weeks turned into months, and Arik's body grew stronger. His scars, once a source of shame, became part of his identity. Every movement reminded him of the battles he had already survived and the lessons they had taught him. He could climb higher than before, run faster, and endure longer. He practiced with makeshift weapons, learned to move silently through forests, and honed his reflexes. With Eamon's guidance, he also learned to remain calm in the face of danger, to think clearly when threatened, and to use his mind as much as his body. Despite his progress, doubt still crept into Arik's heart. Late at night, he would lie awake, wondering if all his effort would ever be recognized, if the village would ever stop mocking him. He remembered the whispers, the cruel names, and the laughter that had haunted his childhood. There were times when he felt small, overwhelmed, and unsure if he could truly rise above the ridicule, but then he would think of the contest and how he had surprised everyone, and that small flame of confidence would grow stronger. Arik's determination began to show in subtle ways. He helped neighbors with difficult tasks, using his strength and skills to accomplish what others could not. He rescued animals trapped in the forest, climbed steep hills to gather supplies, and solved problems that seemed impossible. People began to notice, though few admitted it aloud. Murmurs of curiosity replaced the laughter, and some children, once cruel, started to watch him with admiration. Yet Arik never sought attention. He trained for himself, for the quiet satisfaction of knowing that he was improving every day. The real test came when the village faced a crisis. A severe storm had damaged the fields, and many villagers were trapped in their homes, struggling to survive. People panicked, unsure how to handle the situation. Arik, without hesitation, stepped forward. He climbed trees to rescue stranded animals, carried heavy supplies through the mud, and guided frightened villagers to safe areas. For the first time, his scars were no longer seen as flaws. They were signs of someone who had endured pain, learned resilience, and could protect others. During this crisis, Arik realized something profound. Strength was not just about winning contests or impressing others. It was about helping those who could not help themselves, standing firm when others faltered, and believing in one's own abilities even when the world doubted you. The villagers who had once mocked him began to see a different side of Arik, a side that was brave, compassionate, and unstoppable. Though many still struggled to overcome old habits of judgment, the seed of respect had been planted. Through all of this, Eamon remained a steady guide. "Remember, Arik," he said one evening, as they sat by the fire, "true strength is never shown in anger or revenge. It is shown in patience, in learning, and in rising every time life knocks you down. Your scars are not a curse. They are a gift. They remind you of what you have survived, and they will guide you toward what you can achieve." Arik listened, carefully, understanding for the first time that his journey was not about proving others wrong, but about becoming the best version of himself. As months passed, Arik's confidence grew. He no longer flinched at whispers or laughed off taunts. Instead, he smiled quietly to himself, knowing that his time would come. Each day brought small victories. He ran faster, climbed higher, solved problems more quickly, and handled challenges that would have once seemed impossible. His scars, once a symbol of shame, now marked him as someone who had endured, survived, and grown stronger. By the end of this period of intense training, Arik was no longer just the boy with scars. He was a young warrior in every sense, capable of facing physical challenges, thinking strategically, and remaining calm under pressure. The villagers had begun to whisper with respect, and even those who had mocked him started to recognize that there was something different about this boy. He was no longer someone to laugh at. He was someone to watch, someone to admire, someone who was quietly becoming a legend in the making. And though Arik knew the path ahead would be long and filled with even greater challenges, he felt ready. Every moment of training, every ache, every early morning, and every lesson from Eamon had prepared him. He had embraced his scars, his failures, and his doubts, turning them into fuel for his journey. The boy who had once been mocked for his appearance had begun to transform, rising not because others demanded it, but because he had chosen it for himself. The turning point in Arik's life came when the village faced a danger far greater than any contest or storm. One morning, as the sun rose over the hills, a band of outsiders appeared on the horizon. They were a group of skilled warriors from a neighboring region known for taking what they wanted and causing fear wherever they went. The villagers were terrified, Most had never seen such strangers before, and panic spread quickly. Children clung to their parents, and elders whispered prayers. Many felt helpless, believing there was nothing they could do. Arik, however, did not panic. He had trained for months, pushing his body and mind to their limits. He had learned endurance, strategy, and courage. And now, he realized, the moment had come to put everything he had learned to the test. While others argued about what to do, he stepped forward. "We cannot wait for fear to decide for us," he said firmly, his voice carrying over the frightened crowd. "We must act, and we must act together. I will lead. Trust me." The villagers looked at him skeptically. Some remembered the boy who had once been mocked, the one with the scars that marked him as different. But there was something in his eyes, a calm determination that could not be ignored. Slowly, a few brave souls agreed to follow him. Arik quickly began organizing the villagers, dividing them into small teams, each with a specific role. Some were to guard the entrances, others to distract the intruders, and a few were tasked with helping families escape to safe areas. Every decision was calculated, every movement purposeful. As the outsiders approached, Arik took a deep breath, feeling the familiar tension in his muscles and the adrenaline coursing through his body. He remembered his training, the hours of running, climbing, and learning strategy with Eamon. Every scar on his arms and face reminded him of past struggles, of battles survived, and of lessons learned. They were no longer marks of shame. They were reminders of resilience. And now, they would serve him as symbols of courage and strength. The first confrontation came unexpectedly. One of the intruders tried to force entry through a narrow path leading to the village center. Arik was there before anyone could react. Using his speed and agility, he intercepted the warrior, moving with a precision that startled both the intruder and the villagers watching. He used the techniques Eamon had taught him, not just relying on brute strength but thinking ahead, predicting the opponent's moves, and staying calm under pressure. Within moments, the intruder was disarmed and subdued. Word spread quickly among the villagers. "Arik is standing up to them," people whispered, some in disbelief and others in admiration. The boy they had once mocked was now the first line of defense. Encouraged by this small victory, Arik continued to organize and lead. He directed teams to set up simple traps and barricades, using natural features of the village to their advantage. Every decision he made was careful and precise, showing a skill far beyond his years. The outsiders were skilled, but they were not prepared for Arik's strategy. They had expected fear and chaos, but instead, they found order and resistance. Arik's careful planning allowed the villagers to protect themselves while minimizing harm. He personally guided families to safety, using his strength to carry those who could not move quickly. His scars, once a source of mockery, now became marks of authority and bravery. People began to see him as a leader, someone who had endured much and now had the courage to protect others. During the confrontation, there was a moment when Arik faced the leader of the outsiders directly. The man was taller and stronger with years of combat experience, but Arik did not falter. He focused, remembering every lesson Eamon had taught him: patience, observation, and using the opponent's strengths against them. The fight was intense, but Arik's agility and intelligence allowed him to outmaneuver the intruder. With a well-placed move, he disarmed the man and forced him to retreat, a moment that left both his followers and the intruders astonished. As the outsiders withdrew, the villagers erupted in a mix of relief and awe. Arik, breathing heavily but standing tall, looked around at the faces of those who had once mocked him. They no longer saw the boy with scars. They saw a warrior who had led them through danger and kept them safe. Respect replaced mockery, and whispers of admiration began to circulate. The very marks that had caused laughter were now symbols of the courage that had protected the village. After the danger had passed, the village held a small gathering to honor those who had helped. Arik did not seek praise, but the elders and villagers came forward to thank him. Some were hesitant at first, unsure how to address the boy they had once doubted, but their words were sincere. "You have saved us. an elder said, his voice shaking. "We were wrong to judge you by your scars. Today you have shown us what true courage is." Arik nodded quietly, feeling a sense of fulfillment he had never known. In the days that followed, Arik continued to train and help the village. The incident with the outsiders had changed everything. People began to approach him for guidance, for lessons in strategy, and for help in solving problems. Children who had once teased him now watched him with admiration, hoping to learn from his example. The village had begun to see that strength was not measured by appearance but by heart, skill, and perseverance. Aemon, the old warrior, observed Arik's growth with quiet pride. "You have crossed the first great test," he told him one evening. "The mockery of others no longer touches you, and your scars have become part of your story, not a limitation. Remember this feeling, this confidence. It will carry you through even greater challenges." Arik listened, understanding that this was not the end of his journey, but a pivotal moment. He had turned ridicule into determination, fear into courage, and doubt into action. The turning point had not only changed the villagers' perception of Arik, but also transformed his own view of himself. He no longer questioned his worth or ability. The boy who had once hidden in shame now stood as a leader, a protector, and a symbol of resilience. Every scar on his body reminded him of the path he had traveled, the hardships he had endured, and the strength he had discovered within himself. As the sun set over the village hills, casting a golden glow across the landscape, Arik stood on a small rise overlooking the fields. The wind brushed against his face, and he felt a calm determination settle within him. The path ahead would be long, and greater challenges would come, but he was ready. The boy who had been mocked for his scars had risen, not because he sought approval, but because he had chosen to embrace his strength. The turning point had arrived, and Arik had faced it with courage, skill, and intelligence. From this moment on, the villagers knew that they could rely on him, and Arik knew that he had the power to shape his own destiny. His journey from mockery to legend had begun, and there was no turning back. Every lesson, every hardship, and every scar had prepared him for the next step. And in the quiet of the evening, as the village recovered from its ordeal, Arik felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. The warrior within him had awakened, and the world would soon take notice. After the confrontation with the outsiders, Arik's life began to change in ways he had never imagined. Word of his courage and skill spread beyond the village, reaching nearby towns and settlements. People began to speak of the boy with scars, who had stood against danger and led his village to safety. Many were curious, some skeptical, but all were drawn to the story of the young warrior who had faced fear without hesitation. Arik, however, did not let attention distract him. He continued his training with the same discipline he had learned from Aemon. He climbed hills before sunrise, ran long distances, and practiced his skills with precision. Every day brought new challenges, and he welcomed them. He sought to strengthen not only his body but also his mind, learning to stay calm in difficult situations and think strategically. The lessons he had learned during the attack had shown him the power of preparation, and he applied them diligently to every aspect of his life. The villagers, once doubtful, now looked to him for guidance in all matters. Farmers asked him for advice on protecting their fields. Children sought his stories and lessons, and elders came to him for insight in difficult decisions. Arik treated everyone with respect and patience, never boasting of his abilities, always encouraging others to find their own strength. The boy who had once been mocked was becoming a figure of inspiration, a symbol of resilience and courage. One day, news arrived that a nearby town was facing trouble. A group of bandits had been causing fear and stealing supplies from the local villagers. Many had fled, but Arik saw an opportunity to test himself further and help those in need. With a small group of villagers who had trained with him, he set out toward the troubled town. They traveled across hills, forests, and rivers, preparing carefully for the confrontation. Arik taught his group how to work together, how to use strategy instead of brute force, and how to remain calm under pressure. When they arrived, the situation was worse than Arik had imagined. The bandits were skilled, armed and confident. But Arik remained focused. He observed their movements, identified weaknesses, and devised a plan that allowed his group to act effectively. Using clever traps, distraction techniques, and his own skill in combat, Arik led his team to success. The bandits were forced to retreat, and the town was safe once more. Word of his courage and intelligence spread quickly, and people began to call him a hero. Despite the growing admiration, Arik remained humble. He never sought praise or recognition. Instead, he focused on helping others, guiding them and sharing the lessons he had learned. He mentored younger villagers, teaching them to climb, run, and solve problems. He reminded them that true strength comes not from winning contests or fighting alone, but from learning, growing, and supporting one another. Slowly, the village transformed. Children who had once been afraid or disrespectful began to show courage and kindness. Adults who had doubted him now worked together more confidently, inspired by his example. Aemon watched Arik with quiet pride. "You are becoming the leader I knew you could be," he said one evening as they sat under the stars. "Your scars, once a source of shame, are now a part of your story, a symbol of your endurance and bravery. Remember, a true warrior's strength is measured not only by victories but by the lives he touches and the respect he earns." Arik nodded, feeling a deep sense of purpose. He knew that his journey was far from over, but he had begun to understand the true meaning of being a warrior. As the years passed, Arik's reputation grew. Villages, towns, and even distant communities began to seek his guidance. He became known not only as a skilled fighter, but also as a wise and compassionate leader. People came to him for advice, for protection, and for lessons in courage and perseverance. He continued to train, never growing complacent, always striving to improve himself. And through it all, his scars remained a visible reminder of the journey he had undertaken, a testament to the hardships he had overcome and the strength he had gained. Arik's rise to legend was not marked by arrogance or cruelty. He was admired because he had earned it through dedication, humility, and service to others. People began to tell stories of the boy who had once been mocked for his scars, a boy who had grown into a warrior and leader. These stories inspired others to persevere, to face their own challenges, and to embrace their own scars, both visible and invisible, as symbols of strength. By now, Arik was recognized far and wide. His name carried weight, not because of fear, but because of respect. People understood that he was not perfect, but he had faced adversity with courage and wisdom. He had turned mockery into motivation, weakness into strength, and doubt into determination. And as he looked out over the village from the hills where he had once trained as a boy, he felt a quiet satisfaction. He had risen far beyond what anyone had expected, and he knew that his journey was still unfolding, with new challenges and victories waiting just beyond the horizon. The story of Arik's life, the boy with scars who became a legend, continued to inspire people for generations. Even after he had achieved recognition and respect across villages and towns, he never allowed himself to rest entirely. He continued, training, learning, and guiding others. Every morning as the sun rose, he ran across the hills, climbed trees, and practiced techniques that sharpened both his body and mind. His scars, which had once caused laughter and mockery, were now symbols of resilience and courage, visible proof of his journey from hardship to triumph. As he matured, Arik realized that being a warrior was not only about fighting or strategy. True strength included compassion, patience, and the ability to guide others. He began mentoring many young villagers, teaching them not only physical skills but also the importance of discipline, perseverance, and self-respect. Under his guidance, children learned to see their own potential, to value their efforts, and to embrace challenges without fear. Adults, too, sought his wisdom in making decisions and solving problems that affected the community. Arik's reputation spread far beyond the villages where he had grown up. People from distant regions came to seek his help, to learn from his experiences, and to witness the courage that had earned him respect. Despite the admiration, Arik remained humble. He did not seek fame or recognition. He focused on helping others, guiding them, and teaching them to find strength within themselves. He understood that the greatest victories were not measured in battles won, but in lives changed and hearts inspired. Throughout his journey, Arik continued to face challenges. He encountered difficult situations, rival warriors, and moments when danger threatened those he cared about. Each time, he relied not only on his physical skill but also on his experience, intelligence, and understanding of people. He remained calm under pressure, thinking clearly even when others panicked. His scars were a constant reminder of his past struggles and the lessons they had taught him. They were no longer signs of weakness. They were proof of endurance, courage, and determination. Arik's influence extended beyond his village. He became a symbol of hope and inspiration for people facing adversity. His story encouraged others to rise above mockery, criticism, and self-doubt. People began to embrace their own challenges, understanding that hardships could be transformed into strength and that perseverance could lead to greatness. Arik's journey from a boy mocked for his scars to a respected warrior and leader became a legend told around fires in schools and in the hearts of many who needed hope and courage. Even in moments of quiet reflection, Arik found meaning in his journey. He often visited the hills where he had trained as a boy, feeling the wind on his face and remembering the long days of practice, the pain, the setbacks, and the small victories that had shaped him. He thought of Aemon, his mentor, and the lessons that had guided him through every challenge. Arik realized that his life was not defined solely by the battles he had fought, but by the choices he had made, the people he had helped, and the courage he had embraced. In time, Arik began to document his experiences, sharing stories with the young warriors he mentored. He spoke of resilience, humility, and determination, emphasizing that scars, visible or invisible, were not obstacles but symbols of survival and growth. He encouraged others to face their fears, to train diligently, and to persevere even when others doubted them. His words inspired countless people to believe in themselves and to rise above the challenges that life presented. As the years passed, Arik's life became a testament to the power of courage, perseverance, and self-belief. The boy who had once been mocked for his scars had transformed not only himself but also his community and beyond. People admired him not just for his skill, but for his humility, wisdom, and kindness. His legend was not only about physical strength but about the strength of character, the courage to rise above ridicule, and the ability to inspire others. Arik's story ended not with a single final victory, but with a lasting legacy. The lessons he taught, the courage he inspired, and the lives he touched became the true measure of his greatness. The scars that had once brought him pain were now celebrated as marks of resilience. They reminded everyone that hardship could be transformed into strength, that perseverance could lead to success, and that courage and humility were the qualities of a true legend. And so the boy who had been mocked became a symbol of hope and inspiration. His story was told for generations, reminding people everywhere that challenges and mockery could be overcome, that scars could become symbols of strength, and that anyone willing to persevere and remain true to themselves could rise to greatness. Arik had not only become a warrior and leader, he had become a legend, not just in skill but in heart, mind, and spirit.